for some time, and I'd have conversation with him here and there. And so I'm glad to be here today. Carl was a character, and we're hoping to hear some stories from you later on in the service. You can see there's going to be a time for people to share their own stories. And when we get to that point, we'll bring the mic down to the floor just to make it a little easier. And we encourage you to speak into the mic rather than stand where you are so that everybody can hear it. And that just makes it better for everybody if you can. So we're going to get started today with a song. You may not have known this, but Carl was baptized in the mid-90s. And this song and this particular style of Amazing Grace was one that he would have particularly liked, had sort of a Southern gospel flair to it. So you guys, if you want to stand with me and sing, I'm going to make you sing. It's not just me, but hopefully we can get through this together. Let's do this. Please stand with me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we'd first begun. You sound great. Thank you so much for singing with me. Please have a seat. And I want to invite, I think, Roxanne to come up and share a eulogy. Oops. You bet.
Oh, the downside of switching glasses is I can either see you or I can see what I've written and not both at the same time. All right. It's so lovely to see all your faces today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to gather. My name is Roxanne. I am Carl's daughter. I had a great deal to say and a lot of stories to tell, and there wasn't enough time. So I've tried to keep this a little bit trim. And if I have left you or a favorite story out of this, I hope that you will fill us in on that story later. So Carl Joseph Lundin, known as Carl to his friends and Joe to his family, and I'm going to use a little of each name, all the same guy, was born to Clarence and Millie Lundin in Sonoma County in 1937. Clarence was a plumber, and the family moved across the country many times during Carl's childhood. They lived in Paducah, Kentucky, Pocatello, Idaho, Niagara Falls, Sadlersville, Tennessee, to name a few. Home life was often tumultuous and unpredictable, and it was hard to make friends with so much movement. Carl and his brother Fred both remembered their grandparents. I wrote Anna and Carl, Anna and Frank, Anna and Frank Wall's farm as a place of safety and reprieve. And Carl held his cousins, whom he saw and spent time with when the family was back in California, in the highest esteem. There was stability and a sense of family there, even when it couldn't be found at home. In Carl Brothers Fred's words, Carl always pushed the limit. When he was 10 years old, he got his first vehicle, a big bicycle complete with fenders. Carl took it and took it up to the top of Atlas Peak Road, a decision that ended with Carl, in his words, riding right off a cliff. It was the first of many accidents and many, many vehicles. Carl loved motorcycles, he loved sailboats, he loved trucks, and of course, bicycles. And over the years, he owned many of each of these. Carl was intelligent and capable, but school was a difficult place for him. He dropped out at 17 to join the Air Force, where he lasted just a couple months. Carl and authority were never on easy terms. And he was, in his brother's words, kicked out with a general discharge, much to the relief of both Carl and the Air Force. After the Air Force, Carl found his way into the forestry, fighting fires. He worked many jobs over the course of his life and many kinds of work, often seasonal or short-term, allowing Carl the independence that he needed. He fought fires, he worked in archaeology, he washed dishes, did handyman work, ran a bar for a couple of years near a commune in Nevada, worked for Kaiser Steel, and drove a truck and pumped portable toilets for a sanitation company. Carl described the work of driving truck and pumping toilets as one of the best jobs he'd ever had. He said, "Everyone is happy to see you when you get there. They leave you alone while you work. They're grateful and they wave goodbye when you leave, and no one else wants your job." Carl often lived on the road, passing between Napa and parts of Nevada as the seasons changed, and spending time on the road in between. Amidst all the movement and change in Carl's life, the outdoors were a place of solace and belonging. He found comfort in the power and the mystery of the desert, the mountains, and the ocean. He especially loved Dry Creek, where he played with his cousins as a child, and where when he stopped being able to drive, he rode his bike every day that he could to Alston Park, where he climbed the hill, lie in the grass, greet dogs, and watch the wind in the trees. Often uncomfortable in what Carl called other people's houses, for much of his life, Carl made his home in trucks. He lived in a moving van, a camper, and an RV, but his favorite setup by far was a simple arrangement in the bed of a pickup truck with a shell. Carl took comfort in keeping it simple. But even in his tiny truck spaces, he was neat, clean, and the space was homey. A simple mattress in the bed of the truck rested on well-organized toolboxes and a cooler full of books, which Carl would never be without. When he could no longer keep a truck easily, he moved to Rolfs Manor in 2005 when he was 68. He called living there living indoors, and his apartment bore his hallmarks. It was simple, it was clean, it was very homey, and he always has treats for dogs inside. Carl married twice, once to Ima June and once to Laurel, my mother. And during his life, he had a number of girlfriends, and if you asked him, he would tell you what he thought of each of them and his state of mind when they got together. But he was openly grateful for his daughter and for the relationship that brought me into the world, even though that marriage lasted just a couple of years. Carl put alcohol down for good in 1985, and he stayed sober for the next 40 years. AA meetings were often staples of his week, and he could be seen riding his bicycle through town on his way to a meeting. Carl's AA fellows know all of Carl's catchphrases and all his stories. They know if you listened, you might hear some of Carl's hard-earned wisdom. Carl loved animals. As a child, his brother Fred recalls he found a baby crow, which he adopted and raised and fed on dog food. Carl still talked fondly of his St. Bernard, Flanagan, who was Carl's road companion in the 1960s and who outweighed Carl at the time. At Rolf's Manor, Carl befriended dogs. He also left the doors open and fed whatever cats wandered in, and he took particular joy from tossing walnuts out his kitchen window and seeing the crows come and eat them. Although he didn't excel in school, Carl was self-taught and well-read. He could talk knowledgeably about philosophy, art, religion, and one of his most beloved topics, TV and film. Societal rules didn't much suit Joe, and often he didn't suit the rules. But he made his way in the world with three great gifts, which he had in abundance: joy in the simple pleasures of life, humor, and gratitude. If you asked Joe how he was doing, he would pat himself as though checking his pockets and say, well, I'm overfed, I'm clothed, and I'm living indoors. What more could I ask for? He liked to cook a meal, put on a movie, and get comfy in his favorite chair. Then with his plate ready and his movie running, he'd grin and he'd say, it's a harsh land and only the fit survive. Carl found aging hilarious, and he liked to take toothless selfies in the mirror and send them to his friends and family. He hated confined spaces, and he didn't take easy to being hospitalized. Even so, he charmed nurses and doctors and visitors, and on a good day, I could follow the sounds of laughter in the hospital to find his room. Joe only went somewhere if he felt like it, and he never stayed anywhere longer than he wanted to. He'd often give his opinion of a place on his way out the door, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And in these ways, he died in much the same manner he lived. He went quickly. He said he had friends and family waiting for him on the other side, and he never expressed any fear of where he was going or what was happening. In the week before he died, he did share his opinion about this life over and over. This time, the theme was gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. His eyes would fill and his voice would break, and he would say, I am so lucky. My God, I've lived a good life. I mean, really. Joe felt that he didn't belong in much of the world, and he saw the places that he did experience love and belonging, especially in the outdoors, as the fingerprints of real grace in his life. I personally struggle with what I sometimes call the G word, God, but Carl was very comfortable with it and used it freely. And he saw the work of God all over his life. He expressed gratitude to God for hard work, for extraordinary experiences, and for beautiful places, especially the desert and the dog park. He was grateful for his nurses, his favorite doctor, his cousins, his brother, his daughter, and his friends. So we are gathering here today to celebrate a complicated man who found joy in simple pleasures, gave thanks to God for all of them, for the breeze moving the leaves in the trees, for a home-cooked meal, for a roof over his head, for a good movie, a drive to the creek, or coffee with a good friend. In that spirit, we come together to express gratitude, gratitude, gratitude for Carl, for Joe, for his life, and for all that he shared with us.
Before we hear from Carolyn, please check out the screens for just a brief remembrance of Carl's life.
I get up in the morning, I drink a cup of coffee, I look out of the window, I try to get it started, I turn it all over, plow it all under, plant them in the springtime, pick them in the summer. I live in my own life, ain't nothing but a good time. No rain, just the sunshine, out here in my own life. I live where I can breathe, ain't nothing but a cool breeze. Nobody that it won't please, out here where you can breathe. Randy and Danny Ray, they'll show back up any day. That's one thing you can count on, but sometimes they'll be long gone. I'd rather be hunting, hooked on fishing, read it on their t-shirts. If you don't believe it, I live in my own life, ain't nothing but a good time. No rain, just the sunshine, out here in my own life. I live where you can be, ain't nothing but a cool breeze. Nobody that it won't please, out here where you can breathe. Hardwood floor creaking, bedroom door squeaking. She's standing in the kitchen, I thought she was still sleeping. Kiss her on the forehead, ask her how she slept. She says, honey, it's so early, we probably shouldn't speak yet. I live in my own life, ain't nothing but a good time. No rain, just the sunshine, out here in my own life.
It's just beautiful to see these pictures of Carl, my friend for 20 years. I met him when I first moved into Rolf's. We met at the laundromat. He left me a drawing of one of the tricycles that he did. But to thine own self be true is a phrase that makes me think of Carl. He loved the outdoors and riding his bicycle to Alston Park and watching the treetops blow in the wind, and the dogs running with their ears blowing back gave him no end of pleasure. Sitting in front of Pete's with the guys, having coffee, watching young moms in their sundresses with their toddlers in tow, just watching little kids tickled him. We both enjoyed watching the 5 to 10-year-olds in the ballroom dance competitions. They were amazing and so confident. Life isn't measured in the number of breaths you take, but by the moments that take your life away. Carl and I bonded over memories of our childhood, time spent on the farm, doing farm chores, baling hay, etc. But more specifically, we both loved barns. Sounds crazy, but the smell of a barn, the unmistakable mix of cow poo and hay, And Carl shared memories of his great family reunions up valley. I was blessed to meet his cousin Susie, one of the nurses who took care of him at the Queen. She told me that she and Carl's daughter were in cahoots when they came to Carl. That made him laugh with a great laugh. What a great laugh. He liked short, stocky, feisty women. I think he liked their spirit. I've not seen many fathers so proud of a child as Carl was of his daughter and her chosen profession. He would say of her, "What better job could you have than to bring new life into the world?" It was no secret that they had disagreements, but they also had a respect and freedom that allowed them to love without reserve. He just glowed when he spoke of her. The greatest lesson I learned from Carl was gratitude, beautiful gratitude. And Carl, I am grateful you were in my life. Lastly, as life's beautiful journey continues, may you remember now and then, I will love and protect you always until we meet again. Carl, Joe. Thank you.
I want to give an opportunity for some of you to share a word if you like, so I'll bring the mic down here and just invite you to come on down. There you go.
Put it down for me. Anyway, it's we're gonna get up here pretty quick because I got to run. We got to run at a certain time because we've got a furnace guy coming. So I'm get up here and say my piece. You know, I had coffee with Carl every Saturday morning for a long time, and we did that as we talked. There was we liked the summer because to get them summer dresses going, and we liked the. But any time of the year, we liked liking the mamas and the kids, and the daddies and the kids, and just watching them. And nothing delighted him more than a feisty little kid hopping along the road and acting tough and feisty, and he just would he just laugh. And as was mentioned, that laugh was memorable. It was something to remember, something to cherish. We had a lot in common, and one of the reasons that we always got along was that we had a common background, what he referred to as a honky-tonk background, honky-tonk country background, and we both had thrown hay off the back of trucks, and we'd both been out there in the country and living that life, and so we got along. And one of the reasons that we got along, and I'll tell you the real reason that we got along, is we had coffee every week. And that coffee would last about 40 minutes, to between 40 and an hour. And then that was enough. Then we had the good sense to go our separate ways, so we never exchanged a cross word. Had I stayed an hour and 15 minutes, it might have been different, because he didn't have a lot of patience, and that was I talked about a couple of months in the Air Force, and I can tell you exactly why it was a couple of months in the Air Force, is because they tried to tell him what to do, and there was absolutely nobody on the earth were going to tell Carl what to do except Carl, and that's just how it was. Roxy mentioned that bike of his, and I went bike riding with him one time coming over the crosswalk here to a meeting, and that was the last time. I went bike riding with him one time, and he talked about him getting in a lot of accidents. There was a reason he got in a lot of accidents, is because when he wanted to go left, he went left. And he didn't bother. And if anybody was in his way, well, that's too bad for them. Or anybody coming at him, that's too bad for them. They better duck. So sometimes they didn't, and he got hit a few times and got knocked down a few times. But his greatest fear was going to what he called the meadows, one time in rehab, he got rehabbed from a hospital over to the Meadows. And he walked in there and he took a look, and there was a nurse at the station right next to the door. He says, "This is a jail." And he turned around and walked right back out again. And he said, so he owned recognizance, I guess. He got himself out, against doctor's orders. But anyway, he walked out of that place, and that was his greatest fear. And I'm grateful that he never really had to do that. He was so he didn't have to live that fear. One of the things that he told me was that there was never a fork in his road. When he went through life, he just went in a straight line. He never had to make decisions. He just went where life took him. And I'll close with this. Acceptance and gratitude was the last things that he told me. And he mentioned it again and again in his last days. Acceptance and gratitude, two lessons that he learned in recovery, the same that we talk about all the time. He wasn't able to live acceptance and gratitude at the very end for a lot of times because he was frustrated, he was a little frightened, and he was angry at that because he knew pretty much what the score was, I think, and so he lost his patience with the staff a few times. But when he came back down from wherever he went when he was in that state, he again. Acceptance and gratitude, he said, is what it's all about. He says that's the only thing that matters. And so I'm grateful to have known him. I'm grateful to have had the time that I had with him. Gonna miss him at breakfast, at coffee, and so I wrangled another friend here. We're gonna start having breakfast during that time. Hopefully he hangs around a little longer. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Anyone else? Great.
Oh, I thought you were coming with me. Yeah, Morris. I remember the truck he had that had the printing on the back of it that said that was then. And anyway,
It did not say this is now.
no, it didn't say
It said
this
that
is
was
now.
then.
That was then. I don't know. I remember him just showing up at my dad's, mom and dad's. The hay would be ready to go in, and Joe would be there. And I don't think anybody contacted him. He just showed up. And Dad would say, "Hey, there's Joe." It's almost like, I think we better take the hay in. You know, he's there. And his old story was, at that time, they put big slings in a truck or a wagon originally of rope. And you threw all the hay in, you pitched it in. And then you go to the barn, and there was a rope pulley, and it would attach to it, and it would go up to the top of the sling, this huge amount of hay into the barn. And his old story was that one day he was in there helping Dad, and Dad slung the thing in and covered him completely with the hay. And I just remember him walking with those long strides around the farm, and he'd just be there. And he came to Hawaii one time. I had no idea he was there. And he called and said, "I'm stuck. We lived there. I'm stuck. I can't go home." And so we figured it out and got him home, got him back to Napa. So my memory of him just is those walking around the farm with those long strides and always helping Dad. Anyway.
Well, I'm Susie the nurse, but I'm also Susie the cousin. And I just loved that guy. I I have some very vivid memories. You know how we have not a lot of real vivid memories as little children, but one of the memories I have is being at my grandparents' ranch and this guy showing up. It's the first time I remember him. I think I was old enough at that point to really know what's going on. I was probably about 4 or 5, and he showed up, and it was probably about hay time. And we lived out there in kind of the middle of nowhere, and there weren't a lot of other kids and not a lot of visitors on an everyday basis. And so that's really novel when someone would come for a visit. And he started talking to me that's another thing, is a lot of times adults wouldn't just start talking to me. I was kind of in the background and all, but he was talking to me like he was very interested in everything. And we found out we had the same birthday. And I just thought he was the coolest guy ever, because the first time, as a little kid, you don't imagine that a lot of people have your birthday. And, later you realize there's probably millions of people with your birthday. But for me, it was a really novel thing, and it made him it endeared me to him so much. So that was like our little bond when he'd visit. We'd talk about what we did on our last birthday and all. And there was a lot of time where I didn't see him, but I'd see him at, at family reunions. And I always enjoyed sitting down and talking with him. And you just never knew what kind of conversation you were going to have. He was so interesting and quirky and all. And like everybody said, kind of marched to his own drummer, and very smart, and had the greatest smile ever. He and I got to know each other a little better actually just in the last few years, because, as Carol mentioned, I work at Queen of the Valley. I've been there for 20 years now. And growing up in Napa, I see a lot of people come in the hospital that I've known from school or family or friends. And so there were a few times, maybe 3 times, when he came into the hospital and I was able to kind of help smooth the way and talk to the staff and kind of talk about, no, really, he's like this all the time, or, just tell them fun stories and get to know him a little better from another side. So when he had some kind of quirky times and did go maybe not with what they wanted him to do, they'd maybe understand him and cut him a little slack. But I just really enjoyed sitting down and talking with him, especially this last time. We had a lot of great conversations, holding hands a lot and just talking about the farm, and him giving me all kinds of movie recommendations, and the way his face would light up when we talk about Nevada, for example. He just had this love of the desert that you could just see it in his face and his eyes when he'd talk about being out in the desert. And there were times when he was in the hospital and things weren't very easy at all. And he'd say, I just want to be in a little cabin out in the desert and sit and just look out over things. It's like he really wanted the simple things in life, like Roxanne was saying. It didn't take a lot to make him happy. As far as what he needed, he didn't need a lot of things. He needed some peace and quiet and something beautiful to look at and all that. So a lot of people from the hospital, I told them where I was going today. I'm an educator now at the hospital, and the unit that he was on a lot of the time, I told them where I was going today. So a lot of people there are sending their love and said to say hello to you, Roxanne, and that even though he was tough at times, they really, really enjoyed talking with him. He told them a lot of his stories too. So I will definitely miss him.
Hi, my name is Dave. I can't say the rest, but did anybody see the black and white of Carl standing next to a black metal sculpture type thing? Well, anyways, we're sitting in a meeting and he had this folder in front of him. And he looked at me and he says, Dave, you want to see a picture of when I was young? And he opened it up and it was a black and white glossy, 8x10 glossy of him. He had black wavy hair. He was really handsome. You know, he always called himself a pretty boy. He was. And I go, wow, Carl, that's really cool, man. I go, were you an actor or something? Is this part of your portfolio? And he goes, oh, no, I was just walking down the street and saw this photography place. So I went in there and had my picture taken. You know, that was Carl, you know. He had that black wavy hair. And so look at his daughter. No DNA required, you know. All right.
Anybody else with a story? Okay, round two.
Well, I got one from his brother.
All right.
Carl's brother Fred sent me a couple stories and asked me to share them. So, he said he also had some stories about some accidents that Carl got into. In 1947, Pop bought Joe a new Monarch bicycle. It was fancy, with fenders and a horn. We took it up Atlas Peak Road. He took it up Atlas Peak Road and rode it down as fast as he could, failing to make a turn and crashing the bike. Survived that one, too. We got back to California in 1953, and Pop got a new job and bought a new car, a 1953 Ford. Pop liked it a lot, and Joe was 16, and he had a driver's license. So he borrowed the car, got some of his friends with him, probably had some beer as well, and went for a drive and crashed the Ford in Dry Creek Road. No one was hurt, but the car was totaled. I don't remember the year, but I think around 1963 or so, Joe had a BSA 650 and was riding back from Lake Tahoe on Highway 50. Somewhere between Placerville and Sacramento, we lost it on a curve, went through a barbed wire fence, and ended up in a cow pasture. There were other incidents, but I think those examples tell a Joe story pretty well. In 1947, Pop bought a chicken farm in Napa. We lived there for 3 years, but the chicken business was based on a government subsidy, and the government subsidy dried up. During the chicken years, Joe and I helped feed them, gather eggs, clean the eggs because clean eggs paid better, and clean the chicken house. We also had 2 cows, and we helped with those as well. We moved often, and that made it difficult for us to make and keep friends. But the chicken farm was close to 3 other families that had boys as our age as well, and we bonded pretty strongly. The Hortons, the Hammonds, and the Teetermans. When we came to the farm, I was 7 and Joe was 10. The Horton boys were 8 and 11, the Teetermans were 6 and 9, and the Hammond boys were somewhere between 6 and much older, but 2 of them were around our age. We'd play baseball in our pasture, smoke cigarettes, we'd snitch in the chicken barn, and hang out together when we could. There was a swimming pool called Vichy Springs nearby, and we'd all go swimming during the summer. There was a creek, and we could go fishing if we could put a string on a stick, find a hook, and dig up some worms. We were all boys together. That's from Fred.
Anyone else? All right. Only if you don't want anybody to hear it. Really? Yeah, come on up. We all want to hear you. All right. I know. I know, yeah.
What I heard when I was coming in is that he liked short, stocky women. My goodness, yeah. I said that at the meeting that we had prior. I said, he always said, oh, I love to 13-step you. So if you don't know what that means, it means that after the 12, you take the woman home, and that's 13. So he didn't give it up for a while, but anyways, that wasn't so important. What's important is that now that I hear his story, he reminds me of my father. And my father was like a guerrilla fighter with I was going to say Christ. He wasn't Christ. Please, No, it was Che and Castro. And he had the same attitude. It's like, who cares? Let's just go have fun and take the car and run it down the hill and bring the kids and put the kids through the windows and, let's stop the car fast, take a picture, take another picture. I mean, talk about the Renaissance or, calligraphy. I mean, the world just started moving, and I think Carl was like that. And I love that very much. And I think he liked that about me too, that we could go and pair up and start journeying through the world with our imagination. I think sometimes men think that is about sex, and a lot of the times, 99% is not. So it was more about this likeness, this resonance that we had. And I'm not going to miss him because I'm going to see him. I'm not actually there, but I don't know where. And a couple weeks ago or so, I don't know when he died, but I remember thinking about him. And so then I found out he passed. And James told me, come today. So I came. And that's how I got to this microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, come on down.
Hello, my name's Leota.
Hi, Leota.
I met Carl through sobriety, and I loved knowing who he was because he talked about the outdoors so much. And he'd bring his little journal and he'd draw pictures of being out in the woods and everything. And I really appreciate his brotherhood because there were times when we were quiet or bored and we'd just sit outside and just, take our time and talk with each other. And I could relate to him because he loved being outdoors. And I'm an American Indian, so I could relate to a lot of things that he shared with me about forestry and being outside and in the desert. And I was thinking this morning, that when we have someone, brothers and sisters in sobriety who die, and we have a saying of the final road of the destiny, and what's at the end of the road of sobriety for you. And I was thinking that I was going to write, something down so I would stick to the script. That's what I'm known for, not sticking to the script. So I just thought, a sweet man in the forest and in the desert, but he always knew how to have fun and really enrich his life no matter where he was. And to listen to him share how much he had experienced in his life, it was amazing. I remember when his wife and new little baby lived in our neighborhood, and that was, a good time for him. And then being an alcoholic, my mind's always going all over anywhere. And I was thinking, well, he might be a nice guy to get to know, to have a boyfriend, And then I started hearing how many girlfriends he had and how many wives he had. And I thought, no, I don't think I want to go on the Wives Hall of Fame in Carl's life. I think we'll be just fine being friends. But, you know, he and I shared a passion for riding a bike. You know, that I always call my bike my pony because I don't have a car anymore and I ride a bike. And I just am so appreciative that no matter what was going on, the weather or whatever, how many times he might have fallen off his bike, thank goodness he was always wearing a helmet. And he'd always be on his bike, rain or shine, and I really appreciated that. So it was like we had numerous things in common, but I just know that he was a very sweet man, and he took the time to share with me what his life was like, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for being here today.
So my name's Corky. I met Carl April 1986 when I walked into the Napa Valley Alano Club. And he was one of the first guys that reached out to me, and we became friends right away. And he was very instrumental in me he said, keep coming back. And there was him and a couple other guys. I kept coming back every day just to see what the next thing they had to say. And somebody mentioned Carl's laugh. He had the best laugh, and we just laughed all the time about, the weird things in life and our adventures. And one thing I remember is his old pickup truck. He had these little aluminum letters, like house letters that said, "I like big girls best," right on the door of his truck. And that really impressed me a lot. And anyway, I just love the guy. That's all I want to say.
All right, come on down.
My name is Carl. On the way over here today, I was talking with my brother Joseph about Carl and my first experience with him. It was after the 12:15. It was my first day in Napa in 2017, and I was not in a good place. And I was sitting out on the bench getting my bearings for what I was going to do next, whether it was another meeting or whatever, and getting something to eat. And Carl plops down next to me and proceeds to tell me a story. And the story ended up changing the direction of my life that day. And what I got out of the story is that I didn't have to burn the house down, metaphorically. And I'm talking here. And condolences. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, come on down.
Carl, what a unique person. I think he's one of the most unique people I know. He was always himself, always said what he thought, and that smile, you always had that big smile whenever you greeted him. I really love Carl. He's a good old boy. And I met Carl at the Sonoma Men's Stag meeting a long time ago. And he was sitting at the table and he had his head down facing the table. And I went up and said something to him, and he looked up and he looked down, and I thought, I don't think I want to talk to this guy. Carl was a big man. But once I got to know him, we became pretty good friends, and we started sharing more stories. What was great was I didn't know that Carl was baptized. I didn't know he was in the Air Force, and what a great family he must have had. It looked like he was a farmer and came off a ranch and had great relatives and stuff. And that was amazing. That all led to why he was such a great guy. He had great family. But anyway, I was talking with Carl, and we got to talking, and we started talking about early sobriety. And a lot of you know that we're just a little edgy in early sobriety. And I was talking to him, and he was talking about Hawaii. And I love Hawaii. And so he says when he first got into recovery, he says he went to Hawaii with his wife. And he says they went into a bar to have a steak dinner and sit down and listen to some good music. And so I says, oh man, that must have really been fun, really a great time, when you're really there. And he goes, hell no. He says, all it made me want to do is throw chairs and get in a fight. That's the Carl I remember, He could be the sweetest guy, and he's a pretty big man. I don't think you wanted to mess around with him. But anyway, we bonded over that issue for sure and became good friends. But anyway, nothing but good memories about Carl. Thank you.
Okay, come on up.
Hi, Mark. And about 4 months ago, I got a call from Rolf's Manor. I was on the waiting list, and they said, we have an apartment. Come on and look at it. So I went to the office, and we started walking, and we walked right past Carl's apartment, and I'm looking in the window to see if he's there, and I'm not paying attention, and the staff person from the office is unlocking the door next door to him. And I'm looking at her. I go, right here? And she goes, yeah. This is Carl's place right here. And she goes, yep. And I go, I didn't say it out loud, but I'm thinking to myself, very funny, God. Because like John said, there's 40 minutes at the coffee shop, and then there's 24/7. The day I moved in, Carl came over and we started talking, and he goes, do you still have a car? And I go, yeah. And he says, well, mountains, beach, desert, I don't care, but let's get the heck out of here. And the 3 months went by really fast, and I thank God for the experience. It was really a blessing. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I've been asked to say a few things about faith and how this ties in. And I was really delighted to have conversation with Roxanne to learn more about this aspect of Carl. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of conversation with him here except for going through the hallway. while he would be coming for a meeting, and see him on his bike and all that. We got along fine. There were a couple times where he had some suggestions for us here at Crosswalk, and we didn't always take those suggestions, and he wasn't none too happy about that. And we wouldn't see Carl for a while, but then he'd come back and everything was fine. What I didn't know about Carl, and I sure wish I would have, because this would have been a fun thing to chase, was he walked very deeply. Even though we have these stories about, him kind of doing his own thing and 40 minutes and, no more and that kind of a thing, because you weren't sure where it was going to go. He read deeply and of very significant minds of history. And I would have loved to have conversation with him had I known that was there. And so his understanding of faith was far more than just a simple belief statement that maybe have led to his baptism. His understanding of God or the Spirit of God was far more than what we might try to encapsulate in a few words, or at a time like Christmas and a guy named Jesus. It was bigger than that. And that impresses me. There are some things that he knew well. Some of you may be familiar with this, a little thing called the Serenity Prayer. Now, why don't you say this part out loud with me? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I hear this repeated often when I'm in my office right across the hall. This is the Lord's Prayer every day. Somebody's saying this around here. Reinhold Niebuhr, who was a significant theologian in the last century, he didn't stop there, as many of you know. He went on to say, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as he did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. What a prayer, this serenity prayer. Talking to Roxanne, a verse that meant a lot to him is how Jesus began his well-known Sermon on the Mount, which is sort of his stump speech. That he probably didn't tell it one time, he told it many times, and probably when he told it at different parts of the region that he lived, people probably hung out for a whole day or a couple days to hear him expound on what we just encapsulate in 2 chapters in the Gospel of Matthew and in Luke. But this is how Jesus began, and when you first hear it, it doesn't make any sense at all. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." A lot of scholars have done a lot of work on this to try to understand it, because a lot of it doesn't make any sense. It seems like it's a reversal of the way that things really are. But I think Carl was in on it. And I think because of his really quite deep spirituality, he actually understood the simplicity of what Jesus was saying and the truth of what these words were communicating. Roxanne was sharing with me as we were preparing for today about, one of his favorite cathedrals to visit. It wasn't a church, it wasn't a building, but it was to take his yard chair or whatever that reclined and just ease it back and look at the trees swaying in the wind. And as soon as I heard her talk about how much he enjoyed seeing that, and she went on to say that he would sometimes, if he was in a bad mood, which apparently was anything after 45 minutes, he would grab his chair and find himself underneath some trees that were blowing in the wind. And within a certain amount of time, his mood would change from being really grumpy about whatever to even laughing out loud out of the joy of experiencing the trees swaying in the wind. That it carried and communicated tremendous depth for him. And there's a good reason why. Jesus was a guy who marched by the beat of a different drummer. And his teaching and the way he lived his life and the things that he did got him in trouble. In fact, it got him killed. Conspiracy between religious authorities who he ticked off and Roman officials who had the power to make sure that they got what they wanted. He got killed because he was pushing against power and reinterpreting things that other people had said, this is the way it is. And Jesus would say, actually in the Sermon on the Mount several times, you have heard it said, you have heard it taught this way, but now I'm going to tell you a different way of thinking about it again and again. And every time that those religious leaders would hear that, you could just feeling them cringe and steam starting to come out of their ears. One of the earliest examples of an exchange like this happens in the Gospel of John. It's in John chapter 3, and Jesus is somewhat known at this point as being a good teacher, maybe a rabbinical background, provocateur, a different spin on things. And so there's this guy who comes to see him who's high up in rank. His name is Nicodemus. He's even in what's called the Sanhedrin, sort of like the Supreme Court of ancient Judaism. And Nicodemus comes under cover of night to try to understand who this Jesus character is. There's all kinds of things about why he came under cover of night that the Gospel of John is saying to us. One is practicality. Maybe Jesus was just busy, because he was an itinerant preacher, and a lot of people wanted to see what was going on. But the Gospel of John's different. They're trying to say more about theology than history, and John was trying to tell us that Nicodemus himself, a religious authority, was in the dark. He was in the dark. And he was coming to Jesus, who was not in the dark. And so Nicodemus tries to butter up Jesus right away to try to get him on his side. Hey, I've heard you're a great teacher, can't wait to get to know you, kind of a thing. And Jesus just cuts to the chase. And he says, unless you're born again, you're really not going to get the kingdom of God. And Nicodemus, focusing on the literal, doesn't understand what Jesus is really getting at. Gets into an argument about, do you mean you got to, go in utero again and come out of mother's womb? Just absolutely not getting it. And Jesus is just sort of, you can just see him shaking his head like, man, you really don't get it, do you? And then he starts talking about the wind. He said, the wind just kind of goes where it pleases. We're not sure where it's coming from. We're not sure where it's going. But the wind is. The wind is there for those who can experience it. I love that. There is a Greek word called pneuma, and there is a Hebrew word called ruach. And these two words both refer to the same things, three different things. It refers to wind, and it refers to breath. So anytime breath is talked about, it refers to that. And it also is the same word that is used for spirit, as in the Spirit of God. In Genesis, at the very beginning, in the creation poem that Judaism gave us, you have God hovering over, the Spirit of God hovering over, and in the wind. And when God speaks things into creation, it's a poem after all, but to speak requires breath. And it's as if this whole thing, this whole creation, counts on the wind, counts on the breath, counts on spirit. And I just wonder if through all of his reading and through all of his not fitting in, probably to any church, too small, too confined, not enough nature, I wonder if it should be no surprise at all that he found spirit, found breath in the wind, and found joy and confidence. He was a human being just like any of us. And yet he found something deep in that experience that even as he was marching toward the end of his life, and was informed by Roxanne what was down the road. He wasn't going to recover from this. He took peace and didn't have fear as he marched toward his last breath, because he knew it wasn't the last breath, that there was another bigger breath. The wind was going to continue to take him. The Spirit could be trusted. And so that leads us to this last song that I'm not going to sing for you, but we're going to sing together. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, completely fitting song to end this service by a guy named Pete Seeger. And he sang this song, and we're going to sing with him, called How Can I Keep From Singing? So may the lyrics of this incredible folk tune keep you soaring, keep you looking up into the trees, that every time you see the wind in the trees, maybe you'll remember Carl, and in remembering Carl, maybe you'll remember wind and breath and spirit, which is carrying you too. Would you stand with me, and let's join Pete Seeger in this song.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth, it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble sick with fear and hear their death knells ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? In prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
God be with you till we meet again. God be in you, go in peace. May his counsel guide, uphold you. May his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. God be in you, Go in peace. Amen. Thank you for being here. I hope you'll stick around a little bit longer. We have some refreshments in the back for you so you can tell more stories. Hang out a while, enjoy your company, and remember, Carl's still here. Thank you.